There's certainly a theme of hospitality in our readings this evening. The prophet Elisha being received in that first reading, and Jesus asking to be received in the gospel. But this isn't some sort of ordinary hospitality. It's not just providing a place for people to lay their heads and have a warm meal. The kind of hospitality that Jesus is asking of us turns everything on its head. And though it might sound like it's against our family, and it's just for Jesus, there's a lot more going on here. Just an example of what makes this hospitality different than what we might have in mind. And this might come as a surprise to you, but I'm not a weightlifter. I know I get this a lot, and it's just the vestments that make me look bigger. But in fact, I'm pretty weak, quite frankly, and I'm starting to get a little pudgy around the midsection. And my weakness limits my ability to do what I used to be able to do. And I hear this from pretty well everyone who's turned 40. I can't lift things that I used to be able to lift, at least without paying consequences later. I can't run for more than 3 minutes without getting winded. And I can't operate at the capacity that I used to be able to operate at. And this, it might sound strange, is the point I want to emphasize about the kind of hospitality that Jesus is speaking about. It's about capacity. It's not primarily about providing a comfortable place for Jesus to come and rest with us. It's about inviting Jesus into ourselves so that he can expand our capacity to love, to welcome him, and I mean to fully welcome him, to allow him to kind of take over everything in us, to allow him to invade every aspect of our lives, is to receive a strength that we're not capable of. And it begs the question, do we want to love those we really care about with the small love that only we can muster? Or do we want to love them with a greater love, the kind of love that Christ makes possible in us? Again, what sounds like abandoning our parents and our children in the gospel is actually quite the opposite. It means the ability to love our father and our mother not less, but more. More because we've allowed Christ in. We've allowed him to show us what it means to sacrifice and the desire to desire the best for the other. It makes us love our children better because we allow ourselves to see them as God sees them, the one who made them, the one who calls them into existence, and the one who destines them for glory. This is the kind of hospitality that Jesus is asking of us, to receive him into our minds and our hearts and our hopes and our desires, so that all those things can be expanded, so that we have a greater capacity to embrace those God puts in our lives. And this is why St. Paul says that in baptism we have died with Christ, so that we can rise with him and to take on his person. He says elsewhere in his writings, it is no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me. Like, this is the kind of hospitality that Jesus is calling us to practice. One that first welcomes Christ so that we can better receive those that God puts in our care. And so this is the culmination of the hospitality that God is calling us to first receive Christ. And to do that really demands more from us, certainly here in this Eucharist. You know, this is not some sort of drive-through where we skip through Mass, we grab Jesus, we wave, and then we run out as fast as we can so that we can get back to the important things of life. We have to recognize that this is a home. This is a home that Christ is calling us to. It's a home where he wants to get to know us better, and it's a place where we can get to know him better. And so we should ask, like, what do we say to him when we come into this home? Or do we say anything to him at all? You know, I remember when I was growing up at Sacred Heart on the west side, and we'd come in to Mass and we'd kneel down and we would pray. We would pray. I was 8 years old and I had my head down and I had an eye open, trying to look around at the people who were around us to see if they were praying better than I was praying. Who's here? Who's wearing what? Are my friends, my classmates here? And we can get lost in that. Or coming up for communion and kind of looking around and saying, I can't believe they're wearing black pants. I mean, who wears those kind of pants? Who's doing this? Who's doing that? It's amazing how lost we can get. Look, this whole place is given to us so that we can recognize Christ pouring himself out for us. And yet how often we come to Mass and don't give Jesus a second thought. We can come in and out like we're going through a drive-through and not give a second thought to the Lord who is giving his life for us here. And that's a drive-through mentality. There's no relationship there. And if we want to love our family and our friends better, with a greater love, then we have to pay attention to how Jesus is asking us to come in, to enter our hearts and our minds and to change us and to change our capacity to love. And so I just want to encourage all of us to consider how we exercise that same hospitality that's shown to the prophet Elisha in that first reading. How do we prepare a place for the Lord in us when we come here? Just one suggestion. I remember one summer I was at a parish in St. Paul, Minnesota. And after Mass, after every Mass, they would sing the closing song, and then everyone would kneel for like 3 minutes in total silence. And they would just kneel and they would pray. And it was a time for the community to just say to the Lord, thank you. Thank you for the gift of this Eucharist. It was a chance for them to say to the Lord, like, stay with me because this week I have something very difficult coming up, or this week I'm going to celebrate something and I want you to be with me in the midst of that celebration. And so it was a chance at the end of Mass in total silence just to say to the Lord, stay with me as I go back out into my life. And so I just propose that to you. I'm not going to have the ushers tackle people if they try to run out after Mass, but just an encouragement to spend a little bit of time thanking the Lord for what he's given, asking the Lord to stay with us throughout the week so that this isn't some In-N-Out burger, but we're really thinking of how the Lord arrives in our midst, how he changes us in this Eucharist, and how he asks us to stay with him as we go about our week. We don't have to run out of here like the place is on fire. Like, this is a real chance to invite the Lord into our hearts to change us and to expand our capacity to love. And so let's invite the Lord in today to receive him more profoundly and with a greater attentiveness so that we can better love the people that we really want to love.